Hey everybody, what's going on? The Montreal Canadiens had another big week of hockey and there's plenty to dive into, but before we do that, let's talk about the sponsor for today's video, the BetStamp Sports app. If you download that application and use my promo code COOK, C-O-O-K, it'll help you navigate the application. And for example, this is a very easy app to use. If you want to look at some of the best odds you can find for any given game, this is the app to use. The Montreal Canadiens are taking on the Chicago Blackhawks today and are slight underdogs in this matchup. You can look at the CoolBet Sports app and get them at minus 105 on the money line, but you're actually going to want to line shop there and use the North Star betting app, and that's where you can get the Montreal Canadiens at plus 105. You might not think that makes a big difference, but it does in the long run, so you're going to want to use this application to help you in those aspects. Even with the Montreal Canadiens picking up a victory against the Columbus Blue Jackets this week, you're kind of starting to see them come back to earth a little bit, and a big reason for that is because of the power play. There's a lot of question marks about how this unit is operating right now, and they don't really have anyone that's doing a good job at gaining the zone. Even players like Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, they should be doing a better job of being able to gain possession in the offensive zone, kind of setting things up, but there's not really a ton of confidence right now going on in that department, and a big reason for that is just kind of the lack of structure right now on the power play. There seems to be a lack of communication, but there's a lot of talent on that first wave that needs to eventually be able to put pucks in the back of the net. But it's a big reason right now why the team is struggling, because they're constantly getting power play opportunities with how well they're playing in the offensive zone. They're just not able to capitalize on those opportunities right now, and there's simply too much skill on that first unit to not be able to put pucks in the back of the net. You look at a player like Sean Monahan, this is an interesting player for me, because if you look at what the Montreal Canadiens likely wanted to do with him going into the season, you wanted to see him build up his value, eventually be dealt at the trade deadline, see if the Habs can maybe potentially get a first round pick for him. He's done a good job of rehabilitating his image. He's kind of growing into that really fit third line center. I don't know if he's ever going to be a top six center in the NHL ever again, even though he looks as healthy as he's looked in a long time. I'm not sure you're going to see him in that role, but for a team like Colorado, say Edmonton maybe, you might see him in that top six role on that second line, maybe that third line, but ideally so many teams at the end of this, whenever the trade deadline kicks in March, are going to need centers, and this is a center that's going to be very coveted if he continues playing the way he is. There's going to be this debate about whether or not the Montreal Canadiens should re-sign him or deal him for assets, and with where they're at in terms of their retool or rebuild or whatever you want to call it, the Canadiens have to do what's best for the future of the organization. And as nice as Monahan has been in red, blue, and white colors for this Montreal Canadiens team, they need to capitalize on what he's doing right now and get the most out of him, whether that's a second and a good prospect, whether that's a first round pick, whatever they can get for him, assuming it's reasonable and they're actually gaining value in that trade. You have to make that type of trade at the deadline. And I think Monahan is just doing a tremendous job of boosting his value. He's able to play on the penalty kill. He's able to play on the power play. He's good in the face-off circle. There's just not a lot of negatives about his game, in addition to the leadership qualities he obviously brings to the table. So for me personally, as much as it's tempting to say, let's re-sign this player, we've seen that in the Marc Bergevin era, that you can't always be doing that with players. You have to be able to deal these assets and get better in terms of the long run and what we're trying to do here with the Montreal Canadiens. So I do believe that Monahan has to be dealt when the trade deadline does come, and I think this would be smart asset management from Kent Hughes and company, and there's no really need to be worrying about this type of thing now. It's just looking ahead into the future and knowing what this organization has to do when the time comes. There's going to be a lot of discussion about how the Montreal Canadiens can continue to build up players' trade value ahead of the trade deadline. They're currently outside of the playoff race, and it's hard to see them continuing with the underlying numbers that you're seeing from this team right now. Sure, there's a lot of talent on this roster, but you're looking at a very young blue line and goaltenders as well that aren't expected to continue playing at this type of level. So you should see more of a downswing later in the season that would put the Montreal Canadiens in a good position to receive another top 10 draft pick. Anyways, that's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below what you think the Montreal Canadiens should do with Sean Monahan looking ahead in a few months' time when the trade deadline does arrive. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.